Welcome to A Better Way to Do College, the podcast where we explore how higher education is evolving and what it means for access, opportunity, and the communities we serve. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Gonzales, Chancellor of the Maricopa Community Colleges. Today's episode looks at the economic impact of college completion. As graduation speeches reverberate throughout the country this month, we are reminded of the significant role education plays not only in the lives of individuals, but in the health of our workforce and local economies. Beyond enhanced labor productivity, college graduates generate profound ripple effects in their communities in the form of home ownership, increased spending and tax revenue, and decreased public assistance costs, creating the ideal conditions for economic growth and future business investment. My guest today, Christine Mackey, President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, has helped envision and build the future of Phoenix for over 2 decades through the kind of intentional development that has brought in billions of dollars in investments from innovation industries, everything from advanced manufacturing and aerospace to biomedicine. Chris's vision and leadership have helped catapult Arizona into a leading role within the global semiconductor landscape, a milestone that brings new urgency to the question of how to further invest in Arizona's workforce, as well as the need for a strong economic development strategy on education. In this conversation, we'll talk about the economic value of college completion and why accessible, high-quality college options are non-negotiable when it comes to delivering on Arizona's promise of smart, generational growth that is not only good for business, but for the people who make it work. So let's explore a better way to do college. Chris, I want to thank you for being here, joining the podcast, A Better Way to Do College. Chris Mackey is the President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, known to most of us as GPEC.
Yes.
And a role that you've been in now for 7 months.
Yes.
And so, very quickly, how did you get to that position?
Time has just gone so quickly. So I became an economic developer about 30 years ago. I was with the city of Chandler for 17 years and then moved to the city of Phoenix, in 2014, and planned to retire at the end of last year. And this opportunity with GPEC came up, and there was just no way to say no to it. Now we get to play in 14,000 square miles and with all 22 cities. So it's absolutely amazing.
Well, I would imagine in a 30-year career in economic development that you've seen this place transform, and it's probably been in an upward trend, but perhaps a roller coaster ride in some ways on the way up, right?
Oh, it has been absolutely incredible. Not only that, but I grew up here. Mm-hmm. So I've seen things change so dramatically. I mean, there are pictures of me standing in a cornfield at what would be the future 202 and the future 101, saying Santan Fashion Center coming soon.
Yeah.
That's now the big old Chandler Mall, and
wow.
There's all kinds of things that are there. But yeah, you're right. The bumps of, my career's been 5 recessions, a Great Recession, and a global pandemic. So lots of bumps along the way.
You've been there and done that and got the T-shirt
along
the way.
I do.
All right. So let me ask you this question that has to do with college access and college completion. That's what we're really going to focus on here today. We often talk about access to college, but we don't always talk about access to completion. What do you see as the biggest barriers preventing students from finishing, and how does that impact the work that you do related to economic growth?
Just in the years that I've worked with the community college and with other workforce development programs, there are usually some barriers that are things that at least I would struggle to understand. Mm-hmm. Barriers to childcare, barriers to transportation and getting to school, and just needing to be able to put food on the table and make a difference for their family. And college doesn't always fit into that package. And as economic developers and as workforce practitioners, our job is to try to help remove those barriers, and they're critically important to remove. There is no economic development without a workforce.
Right.
And so if we don't have people coming to community college and coming to college and graduating or getting certifications or completing, we can't compete for these projects that really change the economy and bring things forward. And I think one of the things I would say I'm most proud of is in Phoenix, the city council was brilliant enough decades ago to move workforce under economic development. In most cities, it's under a social service. So we really got to work closely with the community college programs and our business community and understand what did they need and how could we make those connections.
Right, because you and I have had an opportunity to work together in the past,
We have.
in past roles, and I absolutely know what you're capable of doing, and I see you as a doer among leaders. And during the pandemic, when I transitioned in this role, you were already at the city of Phoenix, and I think you played a central role in helping bring about the Route to Relief program.
Yes, yes.
You know, that was not only just open to the citizens of Phoenix, but really across the county, that helped to build that workforce and do what you just described, right?
Working with you and Mayor Gallego on that project and Lisetta Hokins in workforce and bringing about those quick hit training programs that could get our students jobs. And there's one today that I just heard about. So he has his job. Yep. He was coming out of high school during the pandemic, and now he has a wife, a child, and he owns a house.
That's incredible.
And so when you think about that work that you and the mayor were moving forward during that time, it's just incredible to think about what's happened.
We hear a lot of those stories, and that's the rewarding part of the jobs that we have. In fact, this is graduations are around the corner, and we're going to get to hear many of these wonderful stories that are so inspiring to the people that come and hear them. How do you see education as an economic development tool? For example, if we were looking at economic development as one big pie, how does education fit into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I've been doing my job a very long time. And when I started doing my job, the 3 questions businesses would ask would be, where am I going to find cheap real estate? How close am I to my transportation corridor? And how much money are you going to pay me to locate into your city? Today, their 3 questions are, where's my workforce? Who's my workforce? And how much training does my workforce need? And that really changed, let's call it 2006, 2007, when companies really started to realize they can locate anywhere, but what they can't replicate is that workforce. So when you look at that pie, workforce is probably 70, 75% of that pie, because we can remove the other challenges that they have. We can find solutions to most of their other challenges, but not the workforce.
So when it comes to measuring our success, you know, we use a lot of different metrics. Number of degrees awarded is one of those. But what metrics should we really be paying attention to when it comes to economic impact?
You know, I really think that it's great that people are graduating with degrees, but I think that the measurement should be really focused on who gets jobs and what's the quality of the job they get. Can they support their family? Is it something that's engaging with them? But even more importantly is the retention of that job. So they're not, you know, today we see so many students and so many graduates who go 2 years and they're in another job, and a year and they're in another job. But really, what are those jobs that they're connected with, and how are those jobs affecting the overall economy? Meaning, how much money do people have in disposable income to put back into the market and create parks and streets and libraries? And it really is one entire community ecosystem. And I think that the metrics and measurements of college graduation should be more on the caliber and quality and type of jobs that they receive. Yeah,
and one of the other metrics that we monitor, and I think people should be pleased to know, especially those who invest in the Maricopa colleges, which is, you know, property owners and people going to school here in our state in general. But 90+% of our graduates stay in Maricopa County when they complete. Do you think that's really important for your economic development plan?
There's nothing more important. Being able to retain that knowledge economy, that knowledge workforce is absolutely critical. We used to see, as you know, 30 years ago, people would graduate and they would leave. They would go on they wanted to go someplace more interesting, like San Francisco or Boston or Chicago, or, someplace they thought they were gonna have a better opportunity or a better life. And today, it's not that way. That stickiness of that 90% of that workforce staying is critical. Without that, economic development doesn't exist. And I find it so fascinating when we look at our numbers. And 10 years ago, 53% of our citizens had some college. But if you move to today, we're approaching 70%. And it means they're staying.
We work really hard to make sure that more and more people have access and, more importantly, complete what they've started. And we offer various ways to complete that. You know, the semiconductor training program is a perfect example of that, where in as little as 2 weeks, someone can be trained and ready to work on the floor as a semiconductor technician. So how important are these sort of short-term credentials and certificates in today's economy compared to the traditional 4-year bachelor degree?
You know, I can't think of anything that's more important today than those short-term training programs. When we work with companies, they kind of talk about the fact that 40% of their workforce doesn't need a college degree, but they need them to be certified, they need them to be trained, and that is, I mean, that's critical. That's part of that stickiness that you talk about of keeping, whether they're certification graduates or degree graduates that are staying here. It's because those companies that we've brought here have that workforce that, and they're staying and finding great jobs with that workforce. But that is what we hear from our companies. The other thing I like about that is once they have that job with a company, companies are often willing to pay for their continuing education with the community college or the university and move into the degree program. And so, you know, the students, when we work at it that way, come out with a little or less debt than they would have previously. So I would say from a workforce engine, which, as you know, that's what I call our community colleges, is our workforce engine. I think the programs and that nimbleness that you've all created is truly what sets Maricopa colleges apart.
We appreciate that, Chris. That's something that we're really proud of, and you know, we really strive to maintain that sort of reputation. There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, and since we're talking about the workforce, the displacement of a workforce due to artificial intelligence, we're attracting some high-tech technology type of employment opportunities here in the Valley. Are you seeing AI having an impact on that now, or do you think it will have some sort of impact on what we're drawing into the Valley?
You know, I think as we move into the future, the interesting thing when you think about the Valley is we're really the only region in the country that has the entire AI vertical. So everything from the chip manufacturing to education to data centers to implementation to all of the actual controls that go into artificial intelligence, and we're being recognized globally as the only market that has everything in one place. And so as these companies continue to move forward, and you can't open a newspaper without hearing about a company that is implementing some AI strategy. I mean, for goodness sakes, GPEC has implemented its AI strategies. It's doing incredible jobs for us in mining data. So yeah, we do hear from companies that as they're moving forward with their hiring, not being AI proficient, but having an understanding of how artificial intelligence works is going to be key for that workforce they're coming out with.
Well, and we're doing our part to prepare that workforce related to artificial intelligence, offering a certificate and an associate's degree, now a bachelor's degree, which are both wildly popular amongst the folks out there. So community colleges are often the most direct bridge between education and employment.
Yes.
What do you think they're uniquely positioned to do that universities or perhaps private industry can't do? And you alluded to that a little earlier, perhaps in the nimbleness of the organization.
Absolutely.
Are there some other aspects of that?
There really are, because that nimbleness is something that you can't get in a major university. It just takes too long, and you have to find the right person to punch into and where to go. When you look at the community college, it is really where the rubber meets the pavement. It's the nimbleness, but it's your willingness to listen. So I'll give you another perfect example. As you know, we put the semiconductor training program together, working with the community college, but we brought the band back together again, as you know, and we're doing it in biosciences now with those entry-level bio programs, because it's that chicken or egg. We have looks at all these great large bio companies, but they need 1,000 individuals that are trained in pipetting and how to work in the autoclave and run the labs and move materials around. And so your team and our team and the City of Phoenix team are working together to create these modules that the community college is going to do the implementation for us, and we'll be able to roll out and now bring a whole new sector into the region.
Sure. That question focused on what separates us, you know, perhaps from the others, the universities and industry, private industry, in preparing a workforce, and to you know, to be respectful to the others. I think it takes all of us to be able to deliver the workforce that's needed. Perhaps what may be absent, however, especially with bringing in a company like TSMC, is a strategy and how we involve that, you know, that continuum of how people are prepared for a workforce. So do you think that there's a need for the state to establish an economic development strategy on education?
So I really do think that there does need to be a workforce strategy that goes into where everyone comes together. You put it so well. It takes everyone. It takes the bioengineers coming out of university. It takes the the business individuals coming out of university. It takes the facilities directors coming out of university. But the community college provides the lion's share of that workforce. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's really hard for companies to know where to punch in when they're looking for certain individuals or a certain, like, how can we get training in this area done or training in that area? When they can find a GPEC, it's easy. We reach out to you, we reach out to President Crow, we reach out to President Garamella, and we talk about what can be. But having kind of that one entity where everybody, those individuals at that entity know how to find the right places to put those either customized training programs, or we're looking for 1,000, but we need 250 bioengineers, we need 50 lab techs, we need 50 med techs, we need all of these individuals where kind of everybody coalesces together. I think it would be so not as much over education, but on that workforce preparedness and how to remove those barriers for companies.
So if you could scale one thing that community colleges are doing well, what would it be and why?
I have my no ifs, ands, or buts. It is the certification completions. It's those nimble, quick hit training programs that get our citizens right out into a good quality job. The workforce, the demand for workforce is not relenting. It's continuing to drive forward. I know the unemployment rate's going up, and we talk about AI and how quantum's going to affect that and how all of these are going to happen. But I can tell you that the jobs are still there, and being able to be responsive to those companies of, here's the training that we need. We'll take them on as apprentices as soon as you're done with that training or what they're working on. Just scaling and continuing to expand those quick hit training programs into other sectors like we're doing now together on biosciences. But there are so many industries that, if they have 1,000 employees, 400 of them don't need a degree, but they have a path to a great job with a 2-week or 4-week or 16-week training program.
So like I said, we're upon graduation season. And there are probably a lot of high schoolers out there that, even though graduation is around the corner, they may not know what they're going to do.
Right.
What advice might you give them?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. Identify what you're passionate about, identify what is of great interest to you in doing, and there are so many jobs that are out there that I think our high school students don't even know exist.
I think you're right. I think that's the problem.
In what they can do, and really, you call economic development organizations, call your community college, and find out. I really love. Who would have thought that. I used to torture my brother mercilessly about sitting on a couch and playing video games.
Right.
But those are the students that are now moving into drone technology and drone and esports
really well.
and incredible activities. Our robotics students, we have found, are the best drone assemblers that there are because they're putting machines together all the time, and just in industries that you don't even know exist. So think about what you're passionate about, think about what your interest is, and then let us help you make those connections into where those punch into industry.
And here I was thinking I was doing a good thing by limiting my kids' exposure to online to gaming. Wow, I might have cut off an employment opportunity for them.
Incredible jobs that exist today.
What's one assumption about higher education and economic development that you think needs to be challenged?
Oh, absolutely. That is that our intersections never cross. That they run one direction, and higher education decides everything that they're going to do, and they put the students out the way they think the students should be put out, and this is the training that they need, and this is what happens, and that economic development doesn't have anything to do with workforce or with training that happens, that we just go find the companies and, luck of the draw, we happen to have a workforce that now has a job because of economic development. I think the myth that people really have glommed onto, they don't understand is how closely we all work together and how our two sectors so interrelate. You don't have economic development without workforce, but you have no need for a workforce unless you have economic development.
Correct.
And so those two, there's probably nothing that plays more part and parcel with each other than workforce and economic development. And that is an absolute myth that we don't work together on a very close basis.
So, and that's why we're so fortunate in this area to have someone like you at the helm of GPEC that has that understanding, because that assures us and me that we're going to continue to have these conversations as long as you continue to be in that role.
Well, I feel that way about you as well.
Well, and you're not allowed to retire, all right?
I'd say that back to you.
All right. So looking ahead, what gives you the most optimism about Arizona's future?
Oh my gosh. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up here. I have been here my whole life. And we really were thought of for a long time as cowboys and cactus, retirement, golf courses, a community that was built on growth. And, since the Great Recession, the diversification that's taken place in our economy, you'll remember we were working together during the Great Recession, and education leaders, economic development leaders, our elected officials, we all hooked together and we said, we are never letting this happen again. And we put the programs together to be able to go after the advanced manufacturing sectors and now autonomous vehicles and batteries and emerging technologies and the things that are out there that are so exciting. And so for me, what I get most excited about is where we've come in the last decade is going to be dwarfed by where we go in the next 5.
Well, I'm excited by what you're sharing, because I know you've got an advantage point that not many people have. So
I do.
It sounds like the future is very bright for Arizona. Chris, as we come to the end of this time together here, I'd like to ask you a question, because we have a number of people in the community and we have a number of employees in Maricopa who listen to this and watch this podcast. They all have aspirations, and some have aspirations to grow in leadership roles. You've clearly been in leadership roles. You've been at the tables with so many different types of people from literally all over the world. What advice would you give someone who's thinking about going into a leadership role, and how should they lead?
So I started my career as a researcher and worked my way up to the Economic Development Director for the City of Chandler, and I've been a director since 2008. When you look at leadership, it really is, it's critically important that you always put your workforce first. My job, I always tell my team, my job is to block and tackle. My job is to let the people that are far smarter than I am show us where we should go and what we should do. I think leaders that kind of constrain their team members, that constrain the people that work with them, are great things are never going to happen when you're holding people back that are really have these brilliant ideas. I think encouraging your workforce, your team members to execute on those ideas. And I always tell people, failure's not trying. It's not when they'll come to me and they're like, oh, this didn't work. Okay, but that was, you tried. And so now we're just going to go about it. What didn't work about it? How can we fix it? We had something just recently with GPEC that went that way. And when it came to the end, we were just, nobody knew where it started and where it ended, but everyone was celebrating about the fact that we all had something to do with an execution of a new brand campaign for GPEC and for the region. And so I think my number one thing is the people that you're working with are far smarter than you. Let them do their thing and remove all the barriers from in front of them.
I think that's excellent leadership advice, especially the block and tackle. I think many of us can envision that, and that's how I'm forever going to think of you when I'm in a meeting. I'm not going to get in front of you anymore, Chris, because I don't want to be blocked or tackled. I'm going to just work with you moving forward, okay? So, Chris, thank you so much for being on this podcast today, and congratulations again on your new role. I know that the greater Phoenix area is going to be better for you being in this role, so thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Gonzales, and please know, and your listeners should know, that without the community college, the region would not be here the way that we're shining today.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As we wrap up the first season of A Better Way to Do College, I want to sincerely thank our listeners and guests for their curiosity, insights, and continued engagement. This show has always been about exploring the big questions in higher education, and I hope the conversations we've shared over the past few months have sparked new ideas about college access, opportunity, and student success. It has been a privilege to serve as your host, and I'm excited to pass the mic to our new host for Season 2. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for what's ahead.